Welcome to the show where high achieving women ditch the stress without losing the success. I'm Janessa Finley Ford. I'm a coach, healer, and fierce advocate for mastering the art of being human. Because you weren't born to burn out, you were born to rise. This is where science meets spirit and ambition becomes alignment. And I don't do it alone, so let's meet the other voice behind the mission.
Hi, everybody, and I'm SJ. I'm a results-driven leader who leads with conviction and strength, setting an unapologetic standard of excellence. I build high-trust communities where candor and accountability forge dependable leaders. As a certified crystal healer and shamanic earth and energy medicine practitioner, I blend science, spirit, and strategy together to rewire energetic patterns for peace, potency, and purpose.
So, today's show, we are going to talk about something that's happening in leadership conversations that a lot of people don't call to light. And that is that women are being told to step into leadership with more confidence and more authority and more presence. I'm sure you hear all about that quite a little. But yet, there's that moment that authority actually shows up, and the feedback that comes with it often changes. You're too direct, you're too emotional, you're too intense, you're too soft. And it creates this strange and exhausting leadership puzzle where you just cannot get that Rubik's Cube with all the colors on one side. Because you need to be decisive, but not intimidating, and be empathetic, but not overly sensitive. Lead strongly, but stay likable while you're at it. And somewhere inside that constant calibration, many brilliant women begin doing something almost invisible. And I have been so guilty of this myself. You start editing yourself in each situation to try to fit what you're navigating. And it's not just with words, it's in tone, it's in timing, it's in your energy. And what might look like leadership fatigue on the outside is often something deeper that's happening on the inside. It's a fragmentation of the masculine and feminine intelligence that we all have. Because the unseen layer of leadership is energetic before it is behavioral. And the masculine energy organizes, it directs, it decides. Feminine energy senses, it attunes, it feels into the timing. And when those two forces are split apart, leadership, unfortunately, becomes an act, it becomes a performance. But when they're integrated, leadership becomes magnetic. So today we're talking about that double bind, women leaders experience, and why the solution is not choosing between masculine or feminine energy. It's learning how to embody both at the same time and to really be at peace with who you are. And once that integration happens, there's a powerful shift that comes with it, where you stop managing other people's perceptions and you start leading systems. So let's open our eyes and lean in. With this conversation, I am going to start us off with a story. I don't know how funny it is. You can all decide, but it's real life and it accompanies this topic so well. So, in the somewhat recent past, I would say it was probably 4 to 6 weeks ago, maybe, I was sitting in my supervisor's office actually to go in there to talk about a work topic. And he asked me something with things I was navigating in my personal life at that time, some health concerns with a loved one and some other things. And I had gotten such little sleep the night before, and I did not expect it, but I began crying in real time in his office. And it was exactly this that we're talking about, that double bind, like don't be too emotional. And I wasn't even being emotional about leadership or a work topic in that moment, but literally he was like, well, maybe are you like, should you go home? You can go home if you need to go home. You don't have to be here. And I'm like, nope, I'm getting my ish together. Just give me like 5 minutes. And so I was like, but I have to finish my rant first. So I finished just letting it out. And then of course, started doing tapping. And if you guys have not experienced the tapping, it is on all of our websites. It's on the News for the Soul, under our profile. It's on YouTube. It's everywhere. And if you don't want to look for it, that's totally cool. Reach out to us. We'll send you the direct link. It works so well, and it's great right now for the time change. So if you're struggling with the time change, you want this tutorial, your body will sync to the new time in no time flat. Little sidebar for you. So anyway, this amazing tool that I have in my toolkit, I pull out and I start tapping in real time in front of him. Of course, he's never seen this before, and he's so perplexed. And he's like, "Is this some new tapping therapy you're doing?" I'm like, "Yes, it is, and it's amazing. And you're gonna watch me stop crying, and then you're gonna watch me go slay this day. That's what's gonna happen." And I did. So I don't think it's so much about being emotional when we're okay and centered with the fact that, hey, we have emotions and they're going to present themselves sometimes, not most opportune time. But if you have tools to process through it, you're not choking them back, you're not choking them down, and you're not toting them around like an anchor for the rest of the day either. However, the response you may get in the moment when you are a leader and you're emotional or you're soft or you're too direct or your tone, there's so many things that women receive in feedback about how they need to show up in their leadership that can make it such a tight rope to walk through the leadership terrain. And the more comfortable you are with who you are, like if that experience with my supervisor had happened 7 years ago, before I had tapping, before I was okay with the fact that, hey, I am human and I can be vulnerable sometimes, and I have these tools to bring my power back into my center and then move forward, that whole experience would have gone differently. And you better believe I would not be talking about it on this live radio show at all. So there's also so much power that comes with being at peace with who we are. And that is what we're going to dive into here this evening to talk about all these double binds we get to experience as women in leadership and how we can exit the tightrope and stand on solid ground. So, SJ, let's jump in. Where do you want to start?
Well, I love this conversation and especially how it ties into the universal law of gender and how they all play together within leadership. Something fascinating that I think we are seeing right now is how corporate leadership is changing. The old structure of corporate leadership doesn't seem to be as effective with how fast paced the world is moving now. You have to have the fluff and flow, and there's not a lot of fluff and flow in masculine energetics, which is what the old corporate leadership structure lived off of. So, realistically, in order to master leadership now, we're going to have to tap into that universal law of gender, which teaches us both forces are necessary. Both feminine forces and masculine forces are required to exist and able to be successful right now. Masculine energy obviously provides and governs the direction, the structure, decision, protection, and movement, whereas the feminine energy governs perception, attunement, relationships, timing, and development. I feel like strategy lives under the feminine energy quite a bit as well. I think that's something that we talked about last year a little bit, was how strategy and the feminine energies go together. But the core concept of all of this is that neither one of those energetics is superior to the other. They're simply complementary forces that produce creation when they work together. So, in leadership terms, those two forces generate vision and execution, structure and culture, direction and development. And when both of those energies are present and integrated, leadership becomes more coherent and it also generates more outcomes, more items for delivery as well. The double bind I feel like women experience in leadership is not just the social aspects, though. It's an energetic distortion of the universal law of gender. Most modern leadership systems were built on over-dominant masculine energy. They prioritized control, hierarchy, efficiency, direct authority, rapid decision making, and titles mattered, right? If you had the title, you could force people to just do the things. But typically, those, not that all of these are bad qualities, they're necessary masculine forces. But when masculine energy becomes the only leadership standard, the system becomes completely imbalanced. So when women step into leadership and bring feminine intelligence, like relational awareness, emotional perception, intuitive timing, and developmental leadership, the system doesn't always know exactly how to interpret that. And instead of seeing those qualities as leadership strengths, they're sometimes labeled too emotional, too sensitive, not strong enough. But when women lean into the masculine leadership traits to fit the system, the feedback flips. Now they're labeled intimidating, aggressive, difficult, a bitch. This is the double bind that we get to experience as women in leadership often. Women are being asked to operate within a distorted version of the universal law of gender. And this is where you start to see women try to fit into a different mold that is not their mold, so it doesn't feel authentic. And this is why it's not going to be effective either.
What feedback have you gotten out of that? Like the examples that you've shared, or not the examples you shared, but in your leadership style, what's the most common feedback you hear from people when they're brave enough to actually tell you the
I was
truth?
going to say the things they say behind my back or to my face, because those are probably different.
Right.
I would say the overarching one is that I am too dominant or the bitch, right? Like I'm too forceful. I think one of the most recent feedbacks was I'm really great at the iron fist, but I need to work on the velvet glove. Though, which is a great analogy. I loved it. Like that's fantastic. And also, I'm happy to utilize a velvet glove when deserved. I'm not willing to sway though the iron fist when things are not being listened to multiple times over and over again. So I would say that's the typical one I get, is that I'm far too masculine within my direction of the ways that I go. How about you?
Well, opposite, of course, right? Because that's how it always works with us. But um yeah, I feel like indirectly and from upper leadership, in the moments when I am too soft, I am too psychological. Like, I would rather give someone a choice when really at the end of the day, there's not necessarily a real choice there to be had. But when they can perceive they have a choice in the matter, there's a heck of a lot more commitment. And sometimes I get the feedback that I am too soft. Like, just go tell them to do the thing, right? That old masculine structure and get on with it. That, that doesn't really align with me very much. But I think this conversation actually expands on a piece of our conflict conversation we had a couple weeks ago, where I've really been observing that women who are more outcome driven will tend to be given the feedback that they are too direct, too firm, too edgy, that side of the equation. And those who are relationship focused will be the ones who are told, you're too soft, you're too emotional, you're too kind, you're not firm enough. So I really still feel like where relationships and outcome intersect is the sweet spot for even not just the conflict side of this conversation, but the leadership side as well, and blending those two to find where that alignment is between the masculine structures or characteristics and the feminine.
Yeah, there's so much within this too. Like, of course, titles and items like that, you can force compliance, but you're probably not going to get loyalty and commitment. So while you can force them to comply, you can get that one outcome you desire, but it's not going to reproduce those outcomes anywhere else. Like you will always have to lean into forcing compliance for every deliverable that you want, if that's what you're going to lean on. Whereas, I've heard another simple phrase that you can't ask for a hand until you grasp a heart. So you have to connect with the people in order for them to lean into that trust. or even that desire to do for you. That's the feminine, right? Getting the other individuals to desire to produce the outcomes without you forcing it upon them, which is the masculine. So it's finding that balance between, where do you naturally center? Like we talk about this all the time, right? Like being balanced within your masculine and feminine doesn't mean 50-50. But I know I naturally center a little bit more on the masculine side. So my growth edge is looking at where can I lean into the connection aspects, the relational aspects, to where the team is going to want to reproduce those outcomes for me without me even having to ask. Whereas if you lean more on the relationship side, then your growth edge is going to be leaning into that more directive masculine, of these are the rules or this is the standard, and I expect you to comply with the said standard. You have to have a good balance between the two where there is clarity. You have to have clarity within this. I hate this word, but I'm getting better with it. But you have to have clarity within structures and systems, right? In order for the people to have trust. So if you are always just an iron fist doling out consequences because of non-compliance, they don't have the solid ground that they're standing on, because maybe while it could be clear to you, it may not be clear to them what the expectations are or even where you're trying to go. And the only way you can give them that solid foundation is by letting them come into the relationship with you of, hey, this is where we're headed. This is who I am. This is who you are. These are the things that really light me up. What lights you up? So that you can learn how to motivate through the relationship as well. Now, you also need the masculine for the trust too, though, because they have to trust that you will say and do what you promised. They have to know that there is structure within the masculine too to hold the trust. So hopefully that's not lost, where trust in the feminine and trust within the masculine has to exist in order for us to get outside of this double blind. And this isn't just, a woman thing, right? Because the universal law of gender has nothing to do with male and female. Like it doesn't actually have anything to do with that. It's about us being able to tap into both our masculine and our feminine aspects at any time. It's access to them. Uh, I hate rules, right? So I love that Janessa named this radio show what she did. The rules themselves, though, were built inside old rules, right? The old rules were built inside an imbalanced energy system where they're trying to perfectly calibrate behavior within that system to keep leaders stuck in constant monitoring. So instead of asking, how do I balance the expectations? A more powerful question could be, how do I embody both masculine and feminine leadership intelligence at the same time? So how do I provide direction while also keeping a vulnerable space for that connection and thoughts and feedback of how the individuals you're working with think? What do they think about this? How do they feel about this? Do they have different ideas? Because if you're a strong leader, you want the individual teams that you're leading to be open enough to talk to you, to give you feedback, to elevate risks. But if you don't have the feminine aspects balanced to where they feel safe with you, they're not going to elevate risk. They're just going to do as you say and be like, well, you said to do it, so that's on you. You have to have that vulnerable opening so that they will share what they see so that you can crisis avert a lot of problems before it ever comes your way.
Absolutely. And to stay also within the feminine balance on the back end of that, when people start coming to you with solution or with issues, with challenges, with things that need addressed, not every single one of them might be yours to have to address. So there may be this influx, if you will, of work, depending upon how well you delegate and how you tackle that. But if you're new to this idea and you haven't leaned into this before, once you open that door, there are going to be all of these things. And I recently experienced this myself in the workplace. And then it was determining how are we going to address them going forward so that it's not more work piling up on one person's plate again. And also keeping the door open for the communication. So with that, I think something else you brought up that I want to touch on a little bit deeper, or just from a different angle, is what you talked about, where when you lead from feminine energetics and leadership, when you're addressing conflict, challenges in the workplace, just leading from that posture, oftentimes it can take a little longer to determine how you want to move in your intentionality. And you talked about, you framed it that if you just drop the hammer with the authority, go do the thing, you can do that in a couple seconds flat. And especially if you're new to stepping into a different approach, the feminine approach, you are going to have to maybe strategize and think about it a little bit longer to allow that other angle to come in. But just as SJ said, taking that investment on the front end to lead from that posture is going to pay off on the back end when the results are repeatable. Because essentially, you're teaching people to fish rather than giving them a fish. Where when you lead with that masculine, this is just really quick on the front end, I'm going to drop the hammer and they're going to do what I say and they're going to listen to me. And then the next thing that arises, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm just always just directing, quick to the point, go execute. You're not going to have open communication to really know what's going on in the workforce or what the true challenges are. There's going to be so much stuff that's going to be swept under the rug in that masculine paradigm. But also, what you're going to experience is the same challenge or a slightly different version of it. So you might be sitting here like, no, I don't experience the same challenge over and over and over again. But if you really look at the pattern underneath it, it's going to be the same challenge or just a slightly different version of that same challenge again and again into the future. And so I find it always incredibly valuable to lead from a more balanced place of feminine and masculine. And I have to say, for me personally, in learning to lead this way, the thing that I have had to trust the absolute most is the timing. And I would also would say that the feminine aspect of ourselves is really like honoring the divinity within us and that there's something smarter than my own brain guiding me along the way. And that was something that was much easier for me to live outside of my career and professional workplace, especially in this very structured environment of the government. But when I was able to start trusting it, even in my career, it took a lot of faith for me that the timing, like what would drop in for the best approach to whatever situation I was navigating, wouldn't be so far off in the future that I had lost my credibility or the potency in addressing the moment. And I also had to learn, if you're not intuitively led, you'll have to learn what that knowing, like, I don't know that I know, but I know, like my brain might not know, but my soul knows, my being knows. What does that feel like for you to know that that is really your truth leading you? Because I have been given all sorts of solutions that I could use in the workplace for so many different things I've encountered just recently, like within the last 3 months or so. And I really had to stop and check in with myself. And sometimes I had to say, no, that does not match my leadership style. That would be the worst thing I could possibly do. So let's talk about our other options right now, because that's not going to be it. And I had to own my truth. And I'm so glad I did that, because then when I was in the situation, sitting down, talking with the individual face to face, I was completely honest. I was completely authentic, and people can feel that. They know that. Like, this is the truth. This is what happened. This is how this played out. I didn't get pushed around. And also, this isn't the greatest scenario in the world. So let's take some lemons and create lemonade. And it was easier to get their buy-in into that as well. But it does really require knowing yourself knowing your knowing, what that intuition feels like, and really having faith and trusting the timing, but also not ignoring something. If it's taking longer than what you think would be best in the situation, you can just check in on it and say, hey, haven't forgotten about X, Y, and Z. And I bet also at the same time, SJ, because she is just like pick a direction and pivot, this might not actually fit her leadership style at all. So there's probably some of you out there that is like, probably not. I'm probably going to pick a direction. And then when the minor details get sorted out, we'll pivot. So there's always more than one approach. And this is the importance of knowing yourself to know what direction is best for you to lead your people in, knowing the people that you're leading and knowing yourself so that you are always authentic to what approach you're taking and where your balance is between the masculine and feminine. So with that, SJ, tell me all about just maybe you'll prove me wrong, but I'm just betting and guessing that I'm probably going to move first and pivot later and let the divine timing drop in the in between. What's your rhythm like? Tell me more.
So a decision is always better than no decision in my world. Any decision that takes longer than 24 hours, I will make a decision for us. So that is very clear for my team. Like, you have 24 hours to decide. However, if at the end of 24 hours there is no decision, then I'll make a decision and we'll move. And if it's the wrong decision, we'll pivot later for sure. Within that too, I would say I'm much more of a, hey, there's the outcome. How you get there, I don't necessarily care about that, but that's the outcome and you have to get there in 2 weeks. So however you do that in 14 days is none of my business, as long as it doesn't break anything else. I don't care. Like, you do you, rock your way through that, however, which is amazing for some of the Enneatypes that work for me, and I'm sure drives a lot of them absolutely insane, which is why they have phone a friend to people that's not me, probably, to help them talk through their options, because I have a very firm boundary of this is not my job to do that. So I'm not going to walk you through all of the 5 million options that you have solved, but hopefully you have a friend that can. Because again, at the end of 24 hours, if no decision is made, I'm going to pick one. And I already have the one I'm picking in my head. So, but I like to not share. One of the most interesting things I saw early on in my leadership career was masculine energy led teams, and only masculine energy led teams create insanely codependent teams that cannot make decisions or problem solve items on their own. That is insanely frustrating. So when, Janessa said maybe it's not the same problem you see over and over again. Oh, I for sure saw the same problem over and over again, which is, if I'm not here, why does nothing get done? And why are the wrong decisions made in my absence? Well, it's my fault because I created a codependent team. And that's one thing that I think is super important when you are looking at your team and you're seeing all of these problems with the way they're working. Shit trickles downhill. So what's happening within your leadership style that's allowing or creating these dynamics where your team can't critically think on their own? That was my example. Or they can't problem solve things. That was me, because I was not allowing any space for them to do those items so that they could repeat the outcomes on their own or in my absence. So all of that nonsense of having a team that can't critically think was not about the team at all. It was entirely my own problem to solve about my inner landscape of how I was leading, which is true of everything we talk about here, right? Our relationships, the people that we're dealing with, the problems that exist there, there is always an internal self dynamic that we have that is a mirror to what is happening external. So if you can take the time to reflect and look internal and say, what am I doing that's creating these dynamics? You'll likely find the problem quicker. So for me, because masculine direction was where I felt comfortable, it was a very simple fix of, I had to create space. I had to shut up and not say words or have thoughts or opinions, and just allow nothing for that 24 hours. Now I had to have a timer because I tried with no timer and that turned into 3 weeks of no decisions. And that for sure was not ever going to be a dynamic that I could live with, because that maxed me out real quick. of my tolerance. And then we leaned into even more toxic masculinity energy with that. So I created a boundary that I knew I could be okay with, which was 24 hours. And in those 24 hours, I'm going to have no opinions, no thoughts, no ideas. I'm just going to see what the team comes back with. And what I found was often they came up with far better solutions and ideas than I had come up with before. And then we could take a look at the options and decide the best one, which then meant less pivoting later, which I don't mind pivoting. All the other Enneagram 7s and 3s probably didn't mind pivoting, but I annoyed the shit out of everybody else that was on my team with the pivot and this was useless work for nothing, which in my mind, I'm like, wasn't useless work. You find out what doesn't work and you probably won't do that again. So benefit, toxic optimism over here in Enneagram 7 land. But we were able to be both efficient and flexible by just allowing space for that 24 hours. And then they knew, like, you need to invest the time to figure out how you feel and what you think about this, because you have 24 hours to do that before I'm going to just make a decision. And that might be some crazy shit that creates problems and pivoting all over the place later on. So it worked for all of us once I decided to look at my internal leadership as what actually works for me, right? Had I leaned into the completely feminine aspects, which I tried, right? This was my double bind. That created 3 weeks of non-decision, which made me absolutely insane. So you have to figure out like what is right for you. Not what does the rule book say, not what are people going to have feedback about your leadership style. None of that stuff matters. Like what is truly authentic to you and just moving forward in that authenticity so that you can lead your way and play your game.
Yeah. Giving 24 hours is still allowing the feminine to meet you to balance. The masculine is the energy that has to have it solved right now, right now. And I would get caught up in that um, early in my leadership days. I'm such a doer. That's like, oh, well, if there's a problem, then let's find the solution. Let's find it now and let's handle it. But it really didn't allow for that intuition, that which is smarter than me, to come in at all. So I love where you found the boundary for you around the 24 hours and still allowing the space. I also, we have vastly different jobs, even within our leadership roles. So where many of the things where I've allowed much more space for the answers to come in, the work still is working and things are still moving through the production line, if you will. So it doesn't have that effect. My tight timelines, I feel like you live under tight timelines, where my tight timelines are my own personal work, the things that I have to have done, not necessarily something my team has to have done. And so, from that standpoint, too, just for context for the audience, as you hear us talk, I wanted to give a little bit more background around what frame we both are looking at situations from when it comes to day to day and our anecdotal real life scenarios that we share with you. One of the other things I wanted to bring into this conversation around the workplace is masculine and feminine emotions or emotional wounds that we'll see commonly in the workplace and the behavior that comes with that as well, because it can become a power struggle. And this too is where those double binds will show up. And then the power couple will keep us wound up in that double bind rather than finding how to exit the loop. And so, from the masculine standpoint, for those who really want to be the best in the workforce, and I mean, doesn't that feel good to our ego? Come on, it always feels good to have an accolade, an award, some recognition of some sort. Everybody loves that. But when we stand in the shoes of competition, that is the masculine energy. And what is really wild is we will sell ourselves on the fact that we absolutely believe that the more that we can become the best in the workplace, people are going to like us more. And that is not reality. Like, that is some garbage subconscious program we picked up from school, or I don't know if you all ran that like fun run field day that we had where you wanted to get the ribbons and things when you were a kid. But it starts really young of being awarded, and that's, stroking our ego and making us feel good, getting that quick dopamine hit. But in the long-term relationship with people and how you show up in the workplace, if you are known to be a competitor amongst your peers, it's going to actually make your job more challenging. That's the masculine. And what that be the best actually breeds is shame and failure. Because what you're really trying to move away from is, I don't want to fail. I need to be the best so that I don't fail. And when we fail, there is shame to meet us in that moment. Now, on the other side of that coin would, of course, be collaboration. So, collaboration and working with others, the emotion that can most often be present from that feminine standpoint is disappointment. How many of you out there have experienced this? You're on a project, you're working with your peers, you have the deadline, and someone drops the ball, or they don't do as well as you could have done, or they don't meet an expectation, or they don't meet a pre-agreement of what your group agreed. And what comes to meet you? Disappointment. Because, oh my gosh, this project could have been better. Their, if you want to call it failure, reflects on me because I was participating in this group. And so those also are the most common emotional wounds that you are going to navigate through in the workplace, from the masculine energy, dredging up shame, and the feminine energy, dredging up disappointment. But the real like flex, if you want to ditch the stress and keep the success, is emotional resiliency. And I don't know that I hear about emotional resiliency in the workplace much at all. I hear about this all the time from personal development, and it is absolutely the same for career development as well. No matter what happens to me, I'm going to be okay. And when you believe in that wholeheartedly in your career, no matter what happens, like even if you're laid off, even if you're fired, you know that things are working out for you, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. It's really true. Esther, we've talked about this. The Enneagram 7 embodiment of that optimism is on point, and it's something I've watched her live so well. And I continue to lean into that and cultivate that as she models it so fantastically. But if you can take that emotional resiliency into the workplace and not allow your feelings to be hurt, this is not to oppress, suppress, repress any emotions that you experienced, but to process through them and to know that you're okay no matter what, whether an outcome doesn't quite work out the way you expected. When you pour your heart and soul into something and you take the lessons and you move on to the next, it's going to serve you better and you're going to nail it the next time. That is really bringing the masculine and feminine into balance and back into your empowerment as well. There's just one last thing I want to throw in on this topic, is that so often for those of us who led from masculine energetics, the doing, I'm such a doer, I'm still such a doer, and I have to harness that sometimes, especially on the busy days, take a break and stuff. But the directing, the doing, the achieving, being really linear, all of these things within the masculine that can get you a lot of success early on. First of all, you're going to burn out. Second of all, if you take those traits home and try to build a partnership with your family, with an intimate partner, with those same characteristics, it's not going to work out well at all. So the really awesome thing about finding this balance of feminine and masculine within the workplace is that it then also can be strategies, tools, techniques, patterns that you're building that are also going to create success for you outside of the workplace. So you don't have to step into one persona at work, step out of that persona and into another to have a successful relationship at home. You can just truly be authentic to who you are. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to have to rely more on certain traits in the workplace than others. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just simply saying that if you push, force, are authoritative all the time at work, and you bring that into your personal relationships, you might find that you don't have very many personal relationships.
Yeah, I love that you pull this in together with collaboration too. And you can see like when the feminine is overactivated or the masculine is overactivated within collaboration, right? Like when the feminine is doing a little too much and it's not really that empowered feminine. This is where you see the polling of the audience or the what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I defer to you. Whatever you want to do, let's do that. So again, there's that lacking of the finality of the decision. There's lacking in the okay, now I'm going to choose a direction. It's much more of that. If you can defer out, that would be the preference for a overactive feminine energetic within leadership, which is going to lose trust from your team as well, because now they think maybe you're incompetent. I'm an Enneagram 7, so of course that's where I'm going to go, right? Maybe there's incompetency here, or maybe there's lack of confidence. Maybe there is lack of wisdom or knowledge or experience, whatever. There's a lack of something to where they're not going to trust your ability to lead them. Versus when you move into the over toxic masculine aspects of collaboration, there really isn't collaboration, right? Like you are just telling everybody what to do, and or you are coming in and doing it all yourself. There is no delegation. You're like, shit, be easier just for me to do this my damn self. Take me 2 hours, but it'll take me 55 million hours to explain this shit for the 100th time, right? Ask me how I know that rhetoric, because I've lived it many, many times over again. That is where I lived, in the like, I might as well just do this myself because it'll be easier. Except you're going to eventually max out on what you can do yourself. This is where the burnout is going to happen that Janessa was talking about, as well as you create a team who has no completion energy because they don't have to, because you're going to come in behind them and clean up the mess and complete it. So it's not a standard that they have set for themselves. And they also know that if they mess around long enough, somebody will come in and take care of it. So why are they going to be accountable for it? One, you're probably not listening to what they think or how they feel about it. So if you're not going to do that, then why do they care if you finish it or if they finish it and you have to come in and do it? So you create those disharmony dynamics on both sides of that overcompensating feminine energy and that overcompensating masculine energy. Both are from a disempowered state. They have different look and feel to them, but both are completely disempowered and both have no trust from their teams either whatsoever. And when you look at that, and we've probably all had managers that fall into some of these categories. So if you're thinking about it, you're like, oh yeah, this was Tom and this was Susie for sure. Look at how you do that within yourself. Like, are you more Tom or are you more Susie? Like, what's happening within your dynamics? Do you always just come in and clean up the mess? Or do you just give away all of the power of decision to somebody else? Like, where are you seeing yourself when you're stressed? Right? Because if things are going well, you probably don't do that weird shit. But when things aren't going well, you hit your like stress mode to where you're like over activated, and then you just like completely whiplash yourself into the side that you feel most aligned with, whether that be the feminine or the masculine. So just take a look, like when things aren't going well and you're stressed out, which one do you kind of fall into? And then how do you dial that back? Because once you know that's happening, you can't unsee it. And you will forever continue to see, like, oh, I'm doing the weird Tom thing again. Like, here I am being Tom. Let me like bring this back to Susieville so that you can find the center of like, where is the alignment and the authenticity really at? And sometimes just a simple acknowledgement to your team of, y'all are driving me crazy. Like, I'm about to lose my mind if we don't solve this thing. and creating that space for them to want to acknowledge like, hey, this is not going well. Like this right here is not a thing that's working for our dynamics. What can I do about it? What do I think about it? And how do I feel about it? But you have to be open to allow all of those things to be discussed so that the space can be created so that you don't have to keep re-experiencing the same nonsense. But sometimes just a simple acknowledgement of this is not working. Like whatever this is, this thing right here is not working at all, can be all that it takes for the team to open their eyes and go, oh, I didn't even realize that that was a thing that had been reoccurring. So of course, within this, we talked about this a little bit in the Stronger Together coaching community. But of course, like a dynamic to discuss this that is not personal is describing the situation, the behavior, and the impact, and showing the pattern of this is just what's happening. These are the three things that have occurred that fall in line with this pattern. Any ideas or feelings on how to resolve this, like what's going on, can be a really good way to make it not personal, but still get the ship righted.
Yeah, when you talk about trust, I think there's also conversation around self-trust. So you were talking about, the elements when the team is going to stop trusting the leader. But I too, like SJ highlighted the mirror effect earlier in her example of literally your words, shit rolls downhill. So what were you doing, right? Being the leader of this group. And if you're noticing lack of trust from your team, that's a really good time to stop and check in with where are you not trusting yourself to really step into the leadership energy, because leadership collapses when self-trust erodes, and the team's reflection of that lack of trust is going to be mirrored right back at you. So that's just another symptom to look at yourself. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but it really is the foundation of this leading from the inside out approach, where those small inner shifts are going to make such a bigger impact than trying to get the people around you to change instead. I wanted to take just a moment to highlight some of the things that you're going to see when you're adjusting. So, in the opening, we talked about how we'll adjust in the moment to try to make up for this double bind. And things that you might be experiencing that will turn your light bulb on to be like, oh crap, I am standing in those shoes. If you're feeling decision fatigue, it could be because you're constantly trying to make not the decision that's aligned, but the decision that you think that's going to make everyone else happy or make leadership above you happy, or any decisions, quite honestly, that you're making out of fear of failure, fear of letting people down, fear of not having buy-in from the people around you. Anytime that fear comes into the equation, it's going to make decisions feel incredibly heavy. So something is out of alignment if you're having decision fatigue. Even you, Enneagram 9s, I know you don't love decisions in the first place, but when you sign up for leadership, you know there are going to be decisions that come with it. So it's just an invitation to step further into your alignment. Some sort of nervous system dysregulation, if you're experiencing anxiety or heightened emotions, what else do you see within the workplace and leadership, SJ, with when nervous system dysregulation steps in? I know my go-to is really seeing anxiety or nervousness within people. What else do you observe?
I think anger, right? The other side of that spectrum, of course, right? Outburst, anger, reactionary items. So like rather than responding, they're reacting to the problems. I think like from an action stance, you see a lot more of that reacting to fix the problem that was created rather than being proactive with putting this together so that it doesn't create a problem in the first place. I think those are the items that I often see, but definitely like the sides of those spectrums, right? Anger to non-decision to course, like disappointment, anxiety, I think all of those things are going to be in there. Resentment for sure. You start to see, like, when the team breaks down that much, you start to see resentment build within individual team members, that small things now turn into big things. Whereas, had the resentment not been there, it probably wouldn't have even hit a radar of a problem. But you start to see, like, hey, little things are really affecting the two of you. What's going on? Somebody's stressed out, both of you are stressed out, don't know who's stressed, but something is definitely happening. I would say those are the main things that I see.
Yeah, and then also you could be out of alignment. You could be adjusting to try to be accepted if you're being hesitant in your leadership, if you're avoiding situations that need to be addressed, if you have a loss of your intuitive clarity and you just keep looping in confusion or I don't know which way to go. So those are some symptoms that you could be experiencing that really are calling you as an invitation into greater alignment to be really clear and true to who you are in the workplace rather than trying to adjust and adapt. As we move to the top of the hour here, SJ, is there anything else that you wanted to cover this evening before we begin to wrap up the show?
I think you touched on it a little bit but when we're talking about collaboration, definitely reflecting on who's in your inner circle, right? There's an inner circle and there's an outer circle. And the inner circle people definitely are the ones that you should easily be able to delegate to. And when I say delegate, it's not just delegating work, but it's also delegating decisions too. So that should be a smaller circle than the outer circle, right? Like the inner circle should help you a lot, the outer circle should help you a little. So in that outer circle, maybe those individuals you reach out here and there, but really taking a close look at who is in your inner circle at work and what are their strengths? Like, what are the things that they are better at than you, so that you can lean in even more to that delegation aspects that are both empowering because you're giving them the autonomy and the authority to make certain decisions, and you're taking it off of your plate. So it's no longer even a problem for you to solve, but really looking at that so that you can make logical, wisdom-based, emotionally intelligent decisions on, hey, like this person is going to be really good or is well equipped to make this decision. There's no need for me to exert my energy to try to figure this thing out when I know that they're capable. So really establishing a strong inner circle is going to be so helpful at work so that you can kind of do that divide and conquer.
Such a great point. And we've covered so much ground. This show absolutely flew by. A really quick recap, although can't even begin to hit all the points we covered. We talked about what balanced masculine and feminine energy in the workplace looks like, and some indicators of when you are out of your own alignment. We talked about the main emotional um, wounds or emotions that you're going to see flare in the workplace that come from the masculine energy as well as the feminine energy, and that the place to really step into your power is through emotional resiliency within the workplace. We talked about how to address the situation directly with a three-step structured process that's going to clearly set the tone for finding a solution and having buy-in from the people so they know exactly what you're talking to and where you're headed with clarity. And I'm sure we talked about a whole lot more as we move through this show, what is required of our inner knowing to be in alignment. So, if this conversation stirred something in you, it's probably because you recognize some of these patterns that we went over here this evening as running in your background. Maybe it's the overthinking, maybe it's the subtle self-editing or the softening, maybe it's armoring up and bristling, the constant adjustment of your energy so that your leadership will just land just the right way. But you can't solve this energetic fragmentation with more strategy, and you can't think your way into embodied leadership. And this is exactly why Stronger Together exists. Inside Stronger Together, we don't approach leadership development as a collection of mindset hacks or simply personality theories. We work below all of those levels where the leadership patterns are actually formed. We're working with your nervous system, with your energetic coherence, with your internal authority, and with your personal alignment, not ours. And this is where women stop oscillating between that trap of being too soft, being too sharp, and they become fully expressed as leaders, powerful leaders, the kind of women who walk into a room and decisions become clearer, conversations become more honest, boundaries aren't held with force, and they're not just learned scripts to get people to do as you say. Because the presence of the leader is the integration. When you are present, you are integrated, you are powerful, and you are magnetic. And when that shift happens, leadership simply stops being exhausting, which is the best part. It becomes natural. There's calm, there's clarity, there's magnetism. And when we have enough women begin leading from that level of coherence, something extraordinarily happens. Systems change. And that's the best part. So if you're ready to stop editing yourself and start leading from the fullness of who you are, and to have the ripple impact to make greater changes within the systems and workplaces that you work or businesses you own, we would love to welcome you into Stronger Together. Because powerful women, we were never meant to do this work alone. So you can learn more at www.strongertogetherinstitute.com. We'll be back here in 2 weeks. And until then, keep your eyes wide open.